Well, as we step into part two, want to talk a little bit about how the tension is going to now boil over, and there's going to be a pretty sharp divide between Russia and especially the United States, but some of our other allies from World War II as well. Following the end of World War II, there's still going to be quite a bit of uncertainty and even tension between Russia and Stalin and the rest of the world, especially the more democratic West. And so the decisions made because of the fact that they had lost, you've perhaps heard it said, to the victor goes the spoils, but the winning side decided to cut up Germany into two parts. You can see it there on the left. The western half is going to go to three major powers: France, England, and the United States. And they will divide up the whole country. But likewise, you're going to see them dividing up the three different parts of the most significant city of Germany, which happen to be in the Russian half. And that's going to be the French, or sorry, that's going to be Berlin. You can see on the right there the different portions of Berlin that are going to now be cut off from the western half. In fact, they were allowed, or up to this point, you're going to see them allowing people to travel from the Democratic side to the western half of Berlin and be able to visit people there. Obviously, things are going to change quite a bit as we move along, but for now, this is how things are going to go. You're going to see them cutting up that all important city of Berlin. The western half is going to be to the Western powers, the English, the French, and the United States, and then the eastern half is going to go to Russia. Obviously, this is going to lead to a lot of uncertainty. We'll talk about that a little bit more in detail on Friday. But you can see not only the country, but the city of Berlin going to be divided up among the four major powers that were involved in winning the war. Following the end of World War II, in a way that was similar to what had happened after World War I, you'll remember that we said, coming off of World War I, President Wilson had tried to put together this group called the League of Nations. It hadn't really worked out super well, but now after World War II, the world says we've got to have something that can keep us unified, something that will hold us together. We've seen how ineffective the League of Nations was. Within less than 30 years, we're fighting again. So now we've got to have something that would be able to bond us together a little bit more directly. And they're going to come up with the United Nations. You can see the symbol there in the middle of the screen. Those are going to be 48 different countries from around the world that have come together to now allow the world to have dialogue, to bring about a sense of community and conversation, especially if there's tension, things can get solved. There's an opportunity for things to get discussed versus having bombs and dropped and soldiers deployed. They wanted to now try to figure out a way to bring the world together. There's going to be a Security Council that is going to, as you can see there, do the math, be roughly between 20 and 25% of the overall group. This is going to be called the Security Council. This is going to allow this group, smaller group of countries, to investigate. If stuff is going on, the Security Council of the UN is able to go in and investigate and then be able to report back to the larger body and say, this is what we found. These are issues that are happening here, things that we might need to address. But again, the Security Council is going to be the group that's going to do that. However, there's even a smaller group that are permanent countries. They said even from the beginning, these five nations will forever be on the UN. Even as some might come and go, these five are going to be permanent countries that are going to be a part of this body. We've got China, we've got the English and the French and the Russians and the United States. Those permanent member nations of the UN are going to persist even still to this day. Now, you might know this, you might not, especially if you went on the DC trip. It's likely that you might be aware of this, but the UN headquarters is even today in New York City. You could go visit that and see where all of this is going to be laid out. They've got all of the different member flags out front. It's a pretty impressive place, but the United Nations is going to be in New York. Well, this is all setting the stage as we think about what's going to be happening going forward. There's a desire to say we want to now set up this democratic, consistent government in the western half of Germany. And instead of having us having disparate or separate parts or zones, we want to now try to bring about some type of unity. The main thing that I think that all three of the countries, the English, the French, and the Americans, are afraid of is that if they don't have some type of unity, there's a good chance that Russia might try to bully their way into the western half and take over even more of Germany. And they're nervous that if they don't find some type of connection, that likely could happen. However, there's a little bit of a concern on the Russian part that if the United States, the English, and the French are going to be overly efficient, there's a chance then that they might help Europe bring about a quicker recovery. And because of that, more people might be quote unquote converted to democracy. They are nervous that if they don't do something or prevent the success of the West, then perhaps more people might see some of the flaws within their system of government. To make sure that this didn't happen and that there was a bigger hurdle for the West to create this type of success, they're going to now stop traffic from the western half of Germany into Berlin. They're cutting off essentially the western half of that city, and they're going to strand it from any type of resources and travel coming in from the west. This is the beginning of what we're going to dub the Cold War. Now, some of you guys have probably heard that term before, but maybe weren't sure or haven't heard really what that means. Cold War, anytime that's talked about, it basically means the absence of fighting using weapons. So there aren't going to be necessarily tanks, there aren't going to be men, there aren't going to be guns. It's fighting over ideology and ideas, fighting using threats and even cutting off of certain places as a way of convincing groups or individual nations to make decisions about how they're going to proceed. And now we've got two superpowers, Russia on one side and the United States on the other, basically staring the other down. The Russians have cut off the city or the western half of Berlin, and now they're saying, what are you going to do about it, America? Well, we'll talk about the American response along with the other nations that are going to be represented in that western half a little bit more on Friday. I hope that you guys have a really good afternoon, and I will talk to you guys on Friday.